It was a towering, translucent figure. Even from above, I could tell it was unnaturally tall, easily 7 feet. It was a silhouette made of dense, swirling black smoke, held together in a loose, human shape. There is a terrifying concept in urban planning called vanished topography. It means that under the asphalt, concrete, and neon signs of the modern city you live in, there is a ghost map, old dirt roads, demolished houses, and erased trails that no longer exist in our reality. Usually, the past stays buried. But on the freezing night of February 7th, 2026, around the intersection of 15th Street and Utica Avenue in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the past decided to take a walk. This isn't an urban legend. It was a massive civic disruption documented by the Tulsa Police Department, local news, and dozens of unconnected pedestrians. For 1 hour, a towering, translucent shadow glided through the modern grid, ignoring fences, cars, and physics. What follows are 3 distinct, first-hand accounts from the people who stood directly in its path. These are their stories. The account of Sarah, local resident. If you've ever spent a winter in Oklahoma, you know the cold doesn't just chill you, it bites. It was around 9 p.m. on a Saturday. I live in a neighborhood just a few blocks off 15th and Utica, and I was out doing the chore I dread the most in February, walking my golden retriever, Buster. The intersection of 15th and Utica is usually pretty busy. You've got the commercial strips, the bright sodium vapor streetlights, and the constant hum of traffic heading toward Hillcrest Medical Center. It's loud, it's bright, and it's entirely ordinary. I was bundled up in a heavy parka, my face buried in a scarf, just waiting for Buster to do his business so we could get back to the heater. We were about half a block from the main intersection when Buster suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. Now, Buster is a goofy 90-pound baby who loves everything. But his entire posture changed in a fraction of a second. His tail tucked tight between his legs, his ears pinned back flat against his skull, and the hair along his spine stood straight up. He didn't bark or growl. He just let out this low, pathetic, trembling whine. I tugged on his leash. "Come on, buddy, let's go." He planted his feet and refused to move. He was staring dead ahead toward the Utica Avenue sidewalk. That's when I realized the sound was gone. It wasn't just quiet. It was an absolute suffocating acoustic vacuum. The constant hum of the city traffic, the distant wail of an ambulance, the wind rattling the bare branches of the trees. It all just vanished. The air pressure suddenly felt incredibly heavy, like that weird cognitive dissonance you get right before a massive thunderstorm drops out of the sky. I looked up toward the crosswalk to see what was terrifying my dog. Emerging from the deep shadows of the Utica Avenue sidewalk was a man. At least, the silhouette of one. He was impossibly tall and incredibly thin. But the horror of what I was looking at didn't hit me until he stepped out of the shadows and under the bright orange glow of the streetlights. The light didn't illuminate him. He absorbed it. He was a 3-dimensional shadow, darker than the night around him. But as he turned to face the street, I realized he was translucent. Across the street, there was a brightly lit pharmacy sign. As the figure stood there, I could literally see the flickering neon red lights of the pharmacy sign shining directly through his torso. It looked distorted, like I was viewing the sign through a thick, moving wall of dark water. I was completely paralyzed. My brain simply couldn't process the visual data. Then, he started to cross the street. He didn't walk. His shoulders didn't bob up and down with the rhythm of human footsteps. He glided. He moved across the asphalt with this smooth, terrifying, frictionless motion, completely ignoring the modern curbs. Right as he reached the center lane, a massive SUV came speeding down 15th Street. I wanted to scream, to warn the driver, but my throat was tight. The SUV didn't slow down. It blew right through the intersection, passing within inches of the translucent figure. The headlights hit the entity, illuminating nothing but empty air for a split second. And then the shadow was standing perfectly intact on the other side of the vehicle. It hadn't even flinched. The entity glided onto the far sidewalk and simply melted into the darkness near the commercial strip. The exact second he vanished, the volume of the city snapped back on. The roar of car engines, the biting wind, the sound of my own frantic breathing. It all rushed back into my ears so fast it made me dizzy. Buster yanked the leash so hard he almost dislocated my shoulder, dragging me back toward our house. I didn't stop him. I ran with him. I locked my deadbolt, closed all my blinds, and sat on the floor of my hallway for 2 hours. I thought I was having a localized hallucination, a stroke maybe. It wasn't until I turned on the local news the next morning and saw the reports of a massive civic disruption at 15th and Utica that I realized I wasn't crazy. I had seen something that didn't belong to our century, and whatever it was, it didn't even know we were there. The account of David, hospital staff. I work as an orderly at Hillcrest Medical Center. It's hard, grueling work, and by the time my shift ended on February 7th, I was running on fumes. It was a little after 9:10 p.m. I grabbed my heavy coat from the break room and took the long walk out to the employee parking lot near 14th Place and Terrace Drive. The area around the hospital is a massive, sprawling complex of concrete, chain-link fences, and parking garages. It's a very utilitarian space. There's nothing spooky or gothic about it. I was walking toward my Toyota, fishing my keys out of my pocket, just thinking about getting a hot shower and going to sleep. As I crossed the asphalt, the temperature took a nosedive. It was already a cold February night, maybe hovering around 30 degrees. But within 3 or 4 steps, the air temperature dropped so drastically that it physically hurt my exposed skin. It felt like I had just walked into an industrial meat freezer. I stopped walking and zipped my coat up to my chin, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. I looked around, trying to figure out if there was some massive cold front blowing in. The parking lot was mostly empty, illuminated by those harsh, buzzing overhead security lights. About 30 yards away from me, there was a tall, heavy-duty chain-link fence that separates the employee lot from a small drainage ditch and an access road. Standing on the other side of the fence, perfectly still, was a man. I squinted through the chain-link diamonds. The guy was huge. He had to be at least 7 feet tall, but he was built like a rail, completely emaciated. He was pitch black, lacking any defining features, clothing, or color. "Hey man," I yelled out, my breath pluming in the freezing air. "You can't be back there. That's restricted access." He didn't react. He didn't turn his head. Instead, he started moving toward me, my heart hammered against my ribs. I took a step back, ready to run for the hospital doors. I figured I was dealing with someone having a severe mental health crisis. But as he approached the chain-link fence, he didn't slow down to climb it. He didn't look for a gate. He walked straight into the metal. I watched, completely frozen in visceral horror, as his dark, shadowy body simply passed through the heavy steel links. It didn't break the fence. It didn't bend it. It looked like a video game character glitching through a solid wall. He was now in the parking lot with me. He was gliding forward, his feet completely obscured by the darkness, moving in a perfectly straight line. But here's the most terrifying part. His path didn't make any sense. He was walking diagonally across the parking lot, completely ignoring the painted lines, the parked cars, and the concrete parking blocks. At one point, he approached a parked sedan. Instead of walking around it, his form flickered like a dying light bulb, and he vanished. 2 seconds later, he reappeared 20 feet further down his exact diagonal path, having completely bypassed the car. He glided within 10 feet of me. Up close, I could see that he was slightly translucent. The air around him was distorted, rippling with some kind of intense energy. I didn't breathe until he reached the far side of the parking lot, flickered one last time, and disappeared into the brick wall of an adjacent clinic. I scrambled into my car, locked the doors, and blasted the heat, but I couldn't stop shaking. Later, when the police report started going public, a local historian pointed out something that still keeps me up at night. The diagonal, nonsensical path that the shadow was walking. It perfectly lined up with an old, unpaved pioneer road that used to cut through this exact plot of land in the early 1900s, long before the hospital was ever built. That thing wasn't navigating our world. It was navigating a vanished topography. It was walking down a road that was erased 100 years ago, entirely blind to the modern concrete world we built on top of it. If you're enjoying these true Tulsa encounters, hit that like button and subscribe to Creepy Digest. It really helps the channel grow. Now, let's head west towards Swan Lake for our final and most disturbing account. The account of Mark, historic homeowner. If you go just a bit west of the 15th and Utica intersection, you hit the Swan Lake district. It's an affluent, historic neighborhood filled with massive, beautiful homes built in the 1920s. I live in one of the older two-story houses near the lake. It was about 9:40 p.m. My wife was already asleep, and I was up in our second-story master bedroom, sitting by the large bay window, reading a book. The window overlooks our sprawling front lawn and the quiet, tree-lined street below. It was a completely peaceful, silent winter night. The silence was broken by the sound of someone yelling down on the street. I set my book down and peered out the glass. Down on the sidewalk, a couple of houses over, there was a teenager. He looked like he had been walking home from a late shift at a fast food place. He had his phone out, the flashlight turned on, and he was waving it wildly at the massive front lawn of my neighbor's property. "Hey, get out of there! What are you doing?" the kid was screaming, his voice cracking with genuine panic. I looked at the lawn. At first, I didn't see anything. The streetlights cast long, dark shadows from the massive oak trees. But then, one of the shadows detached itself from the tree and moved into the center of the yard. From my vantage point on the second floor, I had a terrifyingly clear view. It was a towering, translucent figure. Even from above, I could tell it was unnaturally tall, easily 7 feet. It was a silhouette made of dense, swirling black smoke, held together in a loose, human shape. The teenager on the sidewalk was backing away rapidly, yelling, but the entity completely ignored him. The figure stopped dead in the middle of my neighbor's manicured lawn. Slowly, the entity tilted its head back. But it didn't stop at a natural angle. The neck bent backward with a sickening, broken fluidity until the face, or where the face should have been, was pointed straight up at the dark, empty sky. It just stood there, staring up at absolutely nothing. The teenager finally broke, turning and sprinting down the block as fast as his legs could carry him. I couldn't look away. The entity remained frozen in that horrific, broken-necked posture for a solid 2 minutes. It was like a film strip that had gotten stuck in a projector. It was a residual recording of a terrifying moment in history, trapped on a loop in the geographical coordinates of modern Tulsa. Suddenly, the flashing red and blue lights of a Tulsa Police Department cruiser reflected off my bedroom window. The cruiser came tearing around the corner, its siren cutting through the quiet neighborhood. The exact second the police spotlight swept across the neighbor's lawn, the towering shadow flickered violently and vanished into thin air. I threw on some shoes and ran downstairs to the street. By the time I got out there, 2 more cruisers had arrived. People were coming out of their houses in pajamas and heavy coats. The street was turning into a mob of confused, terrified residents. The police officers were shining heavy-duty flashlights all over the lawns and alleyways, holding their hands near their holsters. I walked up to one of the officers. "Did you see it?" I asked him. The cop looked at me, his face pale in the flashing lights. He didn't give me the standard PR response. He didn't tell me it was a prank or a trick of the light. He just swallowed hard and said, "We've been chasing it for 40 minutes. It's not a person. It just walked through a brick wall on Utica." They never caught anyone, obviously. You can't put handcuffs on a shadow. The official dispatch logs just recorded it as a suspicious person to keep the paperwork clean. But everyone who was outside that night knows the truth. The city of Tulsa has a deep, heavy, and often violent history. We paved over the dirt roads, we tore down the old buildings, and we built medical centers and coffee shops. But on February 7th, the foundation cracked. The past bled through the concrete. And for an hour, we all had to face the terrifying reality that we are just guests in a city that still belongs to the dead. The most unsettling part about urban anomalies isn't the ghosts themselves. It's the realization that the solid, modern world we rely on for safety is incredibly fragile. If a towering shadow can glide through a chain-link fence and ignore the existence of a speeding car, what else is moving invisibly through your neighborhood right now? The next time you walk your dog down a quiet street and the air suddenly goes dead silent, you might want to look at the shadows a little closer. If you have a true, unexplainable encounter in your city, send it to the email in the description below to be featured in an upcoming video. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and double-check your locks tonight. Stay safe out there, and as always, thanks for watching.